Hey, what do you want to da-da-da?
I don't know. What do y'all think we should da-da-da?
Well, what did we da yesterday?
Yesterday.
All the days feel like the same day these days.
I know.
Like, is today Monday or Tuesday?
Today is Thursday.
Oh no, I forgot to call my mom on her birthday.
Oh, no.
No!
These days, nothing is normal and everything is weird. But you could still save big when you switch to Progressive. That won't change. Not today or any day.
Quote today at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Welcome to Virtual Meditation with Shiloh.
Hello?
Today we're working on forgiving ourselves for not knowing the difference between upload and download speeds before getting cable internet.
That's oddly specific.
Repeat after me. I am not my cable internet.
Wait, I don't have cable.
I'm not a bad... It's my video calls, more like video stalls.
Hey Shiloh, there's something...
I will get AT&T fiber.
And I will switch classes until you do.
Slow upload speeds? You're not a bad person. You just need better internet. With 20 times faster upload speeds, AT&T Fiber delivers a faster internet experience than cable. Get AT&T Fiber with no annual contract. Limited availability in select areas. Call 1-877-ONLY-ATT. Check eligibility at att.com/getfiber based on combined internet 1000 wired up and download capacity versus major cable providers 1 gig service with uploads of 35 megabits per second. Speeds vary, not guaranteed. Restrictions apply.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 305. Coming up this week, oral arguments are slated to begin between Ghislaine Maxwell and the Second Court of Appeals in regards to the sealed deposition that was supposed to be released to the public, but in the end ended up being appealed by Ghislaine Maxwell and her lawyers. So now that has been kicked up to the Second Court of Appeals, and they will hear oral arguments starting on the 22nd of September. So this week, that's going to be a pretty big deal, right? To see if we're going to get that deposition released into the public sphere. And like I've said before, this is a court that already has been involved in unsealing over 2,000 pages of Jeffrey Epstein documents. And in fact, the two court judges, the circuit court judges that are going to be hearing the oral arguments that are going to start on the 22nd are U.S. Circuit Court Judge Jose Cabernes and Rosemary Pooler. And both of these judges ruled last summer that the files in the case should be unsealed. So both of these judges have already ruled once that these files should be unsealed, and now the deposition has come to them, and they will hear the oral arguments on the 22nd, and we'll see what happens from there, right? I've said here from Jump Street that I expect some form of this deposition to be released. Now, is it going to be redacted or something like that? Quite possible. I don't know one way or the other which way they would be leaning with something like that. Obviously, I haven't seen it. But according to Ghislaine Maxwell and her team, the stuff inside of that document is super explosive. So you know they're going to try and push for, at the very least, redactions if, in fact, the Second Court of Appeals decides to release it. So we'll see, right? The beginning of the oral arguments should be an interesting process. I'm going to try and phone in on it if possible and hear the proceedings for myself. And if that's the case, obviously, I will do an episode right after I call in and hear what's going on. But if not, what we'll do is we'll jump right onto an article right away and we'll dig in that way. But any way you want to chop it, we'll be all over that on the 22nd, and we'll see which way things are going. Now, our article from today is about Jes Staley. Now, Jes Staley went to a school called Bowdoin, and there is an editorial board who has a piece out about Jes Staley and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and how it is an unacceptable situation for the university and for the community as a whole. Now, we know that Jes Staley and Jeffrey Epstein were super close, right? We know that they worked hand in hand as far as business goes. And we know that Jeffrey Epstein, in turn, was steering business to Jes Staley. So that is one of the very strong ties that bind them. And then you add on the personal friendship as well, the fact that Jes Staley visited the island, the fact that they stayed in contact for so long, and the fact that they were still doing business all the way up until Jes Staley left his gig at JP Morgan. So he tried to make it out, Jes Staley did, like they weren't really that close, right? He tried to distance himself like all of these folks have done. We've talked about that a lot, even earlier today when we were talking about Ghislaine of the gala, when all the people that would take pictures with her or Jeffrey Epstein have attempted to distance themselves now, when we know that there has been some strong bonds created, let us say, between Epstein, Maxwell, and a lot of these people of so-called polite society. And one of those people who has tried to use the marathon defense is Jes Staley. And we're not buying it. I know you're not buying it. And the editorial board at the Bowdoin Orient most certainly isn't buying it either. This article is from the Bowdoin Orient, and the headline is, "Follow Your Values, Examine Your Leaders," by the editorial board. Last year, the Orient published an editorial titled, "All That Is Great About Bowdoin," in which we expressed our shame that James Jes Staley, 79 P11, a friend and business partner of Jeffrey Epstein, remained an esteemed member of our board of trustees. And we've seen this a lot, right? Especially in academia. We've seen a lot of these people who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein heavily as far as personal relationships or financial ties, whatever it may be. They still remain on these boards and in these boardrooms. We've seen it with the New York Academy of Art and Eileen Guggenheim, and we see it here. We see how Jeffrey Epstein was able to finesse himself an office on Harvard and a fellowship. I mean, are you kidding me right now? A fellowship? That's pretty difficult to do. And even more difficult if you don't have a degree. So, the favoritism that Jeffrey Epstein was shown at these institutes of higher education is just gross. And somebody like Jes Staley, who has such deep ties to Jeffrey Epstein, should not be on the board of trustees. Most certainly, in my opinion, anyway. We're concerned about the character of those chosen to lead the college. When the college president cites an individual who indisputably profited off of a sex offender as a prime example of virtue, this community must question those that represent it and have control over its governance, wrote the editorial board last year. And it's without a doubt 100% they both profited from each other, Jeffrey Epstein and Jes Staley. Now, look, I don't really know how hard the prosecution's going to go when it comes to all these other threads, right? Are they going to follow all of these threads to the conclusion? I don't know. I will say this. I'm pretty confident that the core four can consider themselves good and screwed. Anything beyond that, like I have said, I am not positive about. But guys like Jes Staley, it's rather obvious to me that if they really wanted to nail him, if they really wanted to tie Jeffrey Epstein to Jes Staley, it would seem to me that there are several thousand financial transactions throughout his time at JP Morgan while Jes Staley was in charge of the personal wealth division that should be looked at. And if there are any financial discrepancies, if money wasn't reported, If money was gained through ill-gotten means, then penalties must be inflicted, criminally and otherwise. Since that editorial, Bowden has put into effect new Title 11 guidelines as directed by the U.S. Department of Education that have severely weakened sexual violence protection at universities and colleges around the nation. Bowden, under the leadership of President Clayton Rose, has protested the weakening of student protections and promised that the college will maintain its own standards for student contact. Basically what they're saying here is these universities, they preach one thing, but then they go on and conduct themselves in a whole different manner. They're cavorting with Jeffrey Epstein. They're taking money from Jeffrey Epstein. They're hanging out and having a guy that's on their board of trustees who enriched himself on the back of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring. And that's not hyperbole, right? Did Jes Staley accrue his whole fortune from Jeffrey Epstein? Of course not. He's a bankster, so I'm sure he's been robbing other people as well. I mean, obviously I can't prove that, but you all know how I feel about the banksters at this point. I believe that they're the real problem. And I believe that they're the ones that really have their finger on the button. So this Jes Staley character is certainly part of the problem. He most assuredly has his finances intertwined with Jeffrey Epstein. And if you're going to talk about a new set of standards that the university should maintain, you should probably start by cleaning up your own backyard and your own boardroom and getting rid of Jes Staley. In an email to the college community in mid-August, President Rose sent a strong message that sexual violence would not be tolerated in the Bowden community. Well, what do you know, huh? He has to send a strong email for that? What sort of savages are going to these schools? And furthermore, what the hell is being taught in these homes? All of these higher education institutions are just dens of scum and villainy, it would seem. There is zero chance, if I had children, that I'd be spending $100,000 to send my kid to one of these kinds of schools. Zero chance. He stressed that the college values would not allow for any ambiguity in reporting and preventing sexual harassment and assault. Yeah, you know what? I think that any time that something like that is reported, an investigation should take place, right? I mean, if somebody says that they were assaulted or they've been harassed or whatever, it should be looked into. And an investigation should take place. Nobody should be castigated. Nobody should be ostracized. Nobody should be found guilty right away, right? Let's have an investigation. Let's see what the hell happened. That's a good policy to have, right? I mean, at the very least. But for too long, stuff like this would go ignored, right? People would ignore this kind of stuff, these sort of trustees and these board members, and they'd try and sweep it under the rug when these girls would report this stuff, and nothing would be done, and it would create this whole entire toxic culture in certain areas, in some parts of these higher institutes of learning. And you see it bubble over with the sort of people that are working in these boardrooms. What do you think? A guy like Jes Staley, who's palling around with Jeffrey Epstein, is tripping over his shoes to go and report that there's sexual assaults are up at the college so that they don't get money from the boosters or whatever? Please, it's all a business to these sick people. While we will, of course, follow the law, we will always seek to do so in ways that reflect our values and that provide a process for dealing with these matters that is fair, rigorous, and transparent, he wrote in the email. That's all good stuff, right? Fair, rigorous, and transparent. That's all anyone who is seeking justice, not revenge, not vigilanteism, none of that nonsense, but actual justice. You want it to be rigorous. You want it to be transparent, and most importantly, fair. That means equal justice for everybody. Okay? No more of this two-tier justice system where there's a set of rules for them and a set of rules for the rest of us. That shit needs to end, and it needs to end now. Less than 2 weeks after President Rose sent that email, Bloomberg reported that a subpoena was issued to J.P. Morgan Chase and Company that requires the company to hand over Staley's communications with Epstein. And the hypocrisy rears its ugly head. How are you going to send out that email? How are you going to talk that talk when you are not walking the walk? Staley is still on the board, correct? He's still a trustee, correct? He's still connected to Epstein, correct? His contacts with Epstein are under subpoena, correct? And you have the audacity to send out that email, huh? So much for transparency, so much for fairness, so much for things being rigorous. Staley's ongoing presence on the Board of Trustees directly contradicts President Rose's claims that, despite federal guidelines that many argue limit protections for survivors, Bowden values on their own pose a strong deterrent against sexual violence. Certain Bowden values may foster in many students a greater ability to respect other people's boundaries, but the college is also an institution with ongoing relationships to concentrations of wealth, power, and by extension, entitlement. Bowden values may have served Staley well in some aspects of his life, but they did not ultimately prevent him from profiting off of his relationship with Epstein. That's for sure. And, it's all fine and well to talk about your values and to talk about how you live your life and how, your school taught you about these great values and I learned so much at Bowden. When in reality, you didn't learn enough, obviously. Not enough to not profit off of Jeffrey Epstein. Not enough to have enough good sense and a moral compass that works well enough to know the sort of serpent you were in bed with even after his conviction. Staley's case is not an isolated incident. Instead, it reflects a larger, systemic culture shift that is necessary for Bowden. How can we truly create a space where sexual and gender-based misconduct, sexual, gender-based discrimination, and sexual and gender-based harassment will not be tolerated, while we certainly do not have all of the answers, holding Staley accountable to the values that we claim to be at our institutional core, and removing him from the Board of Trustees would be an essential first step. And hey, look, when you have the editorial board coming out in such a scathing manner, and you have the whole entire community as a whole coming out against you, don't you think you do the right thing and just step down? Save the rest of the board members the grief. Save the university the grief. Save the community the grief. Step down, do the right thing, and come forward and speak with the investigators about whatever you may know. Because I'll tell you what, the spotlight is certainly focused on Jes Staley and his dealings with Jeffrey Epstein, at least financially. These subpoenas are no joke. This is the kind of shit that you end up in big trouble with when you're one of these kind of people that are moving this kind of money all over the place. We already talked about the 97 structured transactions made by Jeffrey Epstein's quote-unquote personal lawyer. That was all at Deutsche Bank. So, we'll see what transpires. We'll see what sort of transactions Jes Staley was involved with Jeffrey Epstein when all of the chips start to fall onto the table. But one thing is very clear. Jes Staley and Jeffrey Epstein are much closer than Staley would like to admit. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I'll be back tomorrow. I hope everybody is having a great Saturday night. And if you're out, if you're partying, whatever it may be, please do not drink and drive. Until tomorrow, everyone.
Progressive presents an interview with your upstairs neighbor.
Hey, it's Rick from upstairs. Yeah, I take it seriously. When I play R&B at 1 in the morning, that's me saying, hey, I'm here for you. And I enjoy repetitive bass lines. I only use expired batteries in my smoke detectors. Nice, right? Yeah, upstairs neighbors help people forget their troubles. Give them something else to focus on. Ooh, want to see how high I can jump?
Progressive can't save you from your upstairs neighbor.
No, wait, let me try again.
But we can save you money when you bundle renters and auto insurance with us. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Bundle discount not available in all states or situations.
From the east side and downtown to the west side in the valley, Los Angeles restaurants are open for contactless delivery or pickup with DoorDash. If you're looking for brunch, happy hour, or just an afternoon snack, DoorDash has your favorite local picks all in one app, so you can follow city guidelines without missing out on everything your neighborhood has to offer. Download the DoorDash app and get your local neighborhood delivered right to your door. DoorDash, every flavor welcome.